So I haven't really talked about where we are with heat signature lately in terms of like just giving like a general summary. And on Twitter earlier, somebody mentioned me in the context of telling somebody else that oh, like open development isn't very good if you just half-ass it, but if you make it really central, like Lucas Pope or Tom Francis, then it works. I'm like, do I really make it central? Am I doing it right? And I haven't done one of these in so long that I kind of feel like maybe I'm not. And I should do more. The reason I don't is I always think like, well, instead of doing like a to-camera video, I'd rather do like a gameplay video. And then if I'm going to do a gameplay video, well then I'm kind of showing off some features that I kind of wanted to be a big deal when I showed them in the next like proper trailer. And I struggle all the time with like figuring out how often should I be doing videos? Should I just do them all the time, every time I have anything at all to show, or should I save them up and kind of try and make them more of an event? I'm about to show heat signature to the press in San Francisco in a month-ish, less than that now. And I'd like it if they were seeing something that hadn't been shown before. That would be quite nice. And I'm also gearing up to do a round of testing online that I guess that doesn't matter if they've seen the trailers for that, but anyway, that's what I'm working towards. And for a long time, so the last trailer I put out showed the new art and the new music, and it had the wrench in it, which was new at the time. So you can, once you're inside a ship, you can run around batting people with a wrench and it makes a really good bang noise and they go flying. And that's really fun. Since then, there hasn't been like, and that was quite a long time ago now, that was before Christmas, and in terms of like time to big playable improvements in the game, it's been a pretty poor ratio. Like I've been working for a long time on stuff that's just fundamental restructuring, and that's, so I'm coming up on, it's been like 14 months since I started heat signature, and it's been about a year, nearly a year of actual kind of full-time development, and I was expecting it to take less time than it has. Big surprise, developer thinks thing will take less time than it ends up taking. And so I was thinking recently, why is it taking longer than I thought? Because in lots of ways it's more efficient than Gunpoint. It's a better design in terms of it generates its content rather than me having to handcraft it, and that's way better. I don't have to write a story if I don't want to. I'm leaving that to the end to see if I want to do it. And everything is much less dependent on some kind of script and some kind of overarching plan. And I can just decide at any time, heat signature is done, I'm just going to release it. Whereas Gunpoint, I couldn't do that if I was like 15 levels into it, and the story was based around having 20 levels, because the story doesn't work. So heat signature is much more flexible like that. But it's still taking a long time, and I think it's just very technical. And when I look at the things I spent my time on, when I am working on new features, if I decide I want to add a new weapon or to add like remote det packs I'm going to do next, and I'm pretty sure that's going to go quite quickly. Every time I add some cool new feature, it's quick, it's easy, it works well, and maybe there's a few bugs that have to be fixed. Like there'll be some bugs that have to fix immediately, there'll be some bugs I don't know about till about 3 weeks down the line, and I realize, oh shit, that thing I did ages ago broke this. But even those are quite quick to fix. And so actually adding stuff is easy, but all of it hinges on these really big fundamental systems. So it's spaceships flying around an infinite galaxy. Infinite galaxy was one big thing that had to work, but I got that working pretty quickly. But then the idea of like, ships are flying around, and inside the ships there's people walking around, and those people can fire bullets at each other and hit each other and have like physics that operate within the world of the ship, and I don't want them to be affected by the ship's movement. We could do something like that if we wanted to, like have it, when a ship accelerates, then maybe you do the Star Trek thing, whoa! But it's not important to the game that should happen, and I don't want it to ruin the interior game. If the interior game becomes unplayable because the ship is moving around too much, that would be bad. So the fundamental system has to be that aboard a ship, everything just plays out as if it was stationary. So that has to be a separate world almost. So the idea of having everything perfectly locked in place and keeping perfect sync with a ship that's moving around and can be steering, can be accelerating, can be decelerating, can be firing missiles, can be being destroyed in real time, like modularly destroyed and broken into separate parts which will have to like, independently coexist. That's a big technical challenge, and I consider something a technical challenge if I have to make it twice. That's my definition. So that was the thing I had a prototype version of. I made sure it worked, I made sure it was fun, made sure it was worth doing, and then I had to reprogram it and make it actually work, because the prototype version would have things like if you play for too long, the airlocks start to drift inside the ships and now they're not aligned anymore. So it's like, okay, we need a proper on-ship coordinate system that's totally different to the normal game maker coordinate system, and will keep things exactly where they're meant to be forever by definition. And I did that, and it took a long time. It was like one of the big chunks of work that was didn't make any gameplay progress exactly, it just made the game more reliable and more robust. And since I've done that, that was like, God, that must have been like 8 months ago now. It's never broken. It's 100% perfect. It's literally never caused any problems. It's just a system that is exactly the way that thing should work. It suits my purposes perfectly, and it's fantastic. So that's great. That's like, how many other bits of programming can I say that about? None. That's the only thing I've ever done right. Or at least until the next thing on heat signature. And so each complex system has required a reworking like that. And those reworkings take a few weeks, which actually isn't that much time in the grand scheme of things when you look at how long real programs take on real games when they're working in a team of 20 programmers and 30 artists and stuff. Adding one tiny feature of AAA games sometimes takes months. So it's not a bad rate to actually rework out a big fundamental system like that in a couple of weeks. But to me, it feels like fucking bullet time. It feels like just glacial, just agonizingly slow. And it's not just that it takes a long time to do this feature, it's that the feature itself doesn't make the game better, it just makes the game work, where it previously didn't work that well. And so at the end of it, I can't show it to you, I can't sort of say, hey, here's the cool thing I did, here's the justification for my last 2 weeks of work. So I do find that stuff dispiriting. It's gratifying in retrospect to think, hey, that ship system never broke down. But doing those things is boring, and I've just finished doing another one. The latest one I did was reworking all of the player and the AI behavior to be a state machine, which is a special way of kind of organizing code that's often used for AI. That means you can sort of define states like patrolling and guarding and responding to a gunshot and firing and stuff like that, and then you define the ways that those can transition to each other. And the advantage of it is that when something breaks, oh, the player went into a weird state when they were meant to be getting in a chair, but instead they died. So we know to look at the free state, which is the one they were in, and look at its transitions to the controlling state, which is the one where he's sitting in a seat, or the transitions to the dead state, which is the one he actually went into, and figure out how the triggers there are going wrong. So basically, when something goes wrong, you know where to look in your code. Whereas Gunpoint, I did have a state variable on some things, but they weren't state machines, and that meant when something went wrong, I had no idea where to look. It was like, oh, a player drops dead for no reason. There are 65 different places in the code where something can kill the player. Whereas now in heat signature, there's only one bit of code that can kill the player, and that right above it there's a list of here are the 4 things that can trigger that, and if it's happening, then I can just say, okay, which of these 4 things did it? And then we narrow it down that way. So it's good, and it will give me a good foundation to build other things on, but it's not exciting. I can't show it to you because it looks exactly the same as the game did in the last trailer. And that also was kind of split between some of it was before Christmas and some of it was after Christmas. And I had a proper family Christmas for which I didn't spend a lot of time, during which I didn't spend a lot of time programming my game. And so in calendar days, it's been a long time since I did anything major to the game. But that is done now, pretty much. I keep discovering new little things that need fixing after that, because it's like taking out the foundations of your house and putting in new ones. The house itself is going to be a bit unsteady at times, and you're going to keep finding places where the floor has fallen through, and you've got to repair it. So I'm still doing a bit of that, but then I'm also just the next thing that we want to do is I want to show it to the press, and also I want to do this internet test. Internet test sounds like what my granddad said about testing online. What I mean is sending out a test version to other people remotely without me being there to watch them play. And the key part of that is that they need to be able to understand the game without me telling them how to play the game. And so I needed to do the tutorial system again, because the tutorial system was we had a shoddy one in there, and it was not really doing its job. And so the latest thing I've done after the state machines, I launched straight into doing a whole new tutorial system with a really complicated thing about priorities. Because we're not making a game with levels. I don't know what you're going to do first, I don't know what you're going to do second, I don't know what you're going to do third in this game. So I just have to look at what you do and then enable or disable the tips that are relevant to what you're trying to do dynamically. And That's difficult. I knew it would be difficult. But I had to make that tip system once in order to see what was wrong with the way I made it. And the way I made it was basically like a tip could be turned on and it could be turned off. And so I'd make it like, oh, docking with an airlock, well, we turn that on when an airlock's in view, and then when you dock with it, we turn it off again. And then it would be gone forever, because you don't want a tip to come back after you've shown you can do it, right? But that problem with that is, what if you see the airlock and then you go away, you don't dock with it? Now the airlock tip has to go away, we have to get rid of it, because we physically, we just shouldn't be showing it if the airlock isn't on screen, because you don't know what I'm talking about. But then when you come back, we've got to make it reappear. So we've got to have this other concept of like a tip that isn't, it has to be more than just on and off, right? Because when it's off, we need to know, should it ever come back? Did you do it? And then there's other things where doing it once isn't enough to demonstrate you know how it works. Like heat sensors, I thought, well, if you get past a heat sensor and you dock with an airlock successfully, now you know how heat sensors work, right? Because you've got past one. But players would time and time again just like go full pelt into a ship, like maximum thrusters blaring, the whole ship is glowing red hot, the whole cursor is bright orange, every indication is saying you're incredibly hot. The heat sensors are, there's this big radius, and as soon as you go into it, a bright red spike points at you and goes brr, 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 like we're detecting you, we're seeing your fucking heat. But they would, if they were on course, they'd just dock with the airlock. And the ship might get destroyed, they might be completely annihilated, but they had no idea there was a heat system in the game. They would just be like, oh well, my ship blows up sometimes when I dock with a ship. So I don't know if you understood the heat sensor from that. Just the fact that you got past one and docked with it. I mean, sometimes you'd be coming in like hot, but not so hot that you trigger the heat sensor because they're random sensitivities. So you might dock and actually successfully have evaded detection, but still not understand that there was even a risk of detection. So it's a real fucking nightmare. So the new system has, every tip has a special condition for should it be enabled or not. And that's a thing where, you know, every time the airlock's on screen, the airlock tip is enabled, and every time it's off screen, it's disabled. But in addition to that, it has a concept of progress, which is how your progress in understanding that thing. And with airlocks, it's pretty clear cut. If you dock with an airlock, I know you know what an airlock is. That tip can go away forever. But with heat sensors, it might be more tricky. So that's completely independent of whether it's enabled or not. So a tip is only shown if it's enabled and you haven't yet shown you understand it, or thirdly, manually dismissed it. You might have, like, if it's displaying on screen, you have a button that you can press at all times, just say, fuck off, I know, I get it. Just don't talk to me about that. That's really important. I didn't want anything to be in your face that you don't want to be in your face. That sounds weird. So that's the third thing they have to factor in. And then the fourth thing they have to factor in is priority, because I don't want a whole bunch of tips all appearing on screen at once, because as soon as you have more than one line of text, players just don't fucking read any of them. It's not that like, you have 2 lines of text and they only read the first one. If you have 2 lines of text, they're not reading either of those lines of text. Those could just be dead weight. There's no point in even showing them. So it should only display one thing at a time, but it really, really needs to be the most important thing. And not just because that's the, it's good to display the most important thing, but because in some cases, the next thing depends on you understanding the first thing. There's such a thing as sequential information. There's things that there's no point in even knowing how to press use to interact with a computer if you don't yet know how to press WASD to control your character, because you would never get to the computer. So there's stuff like that, there's loads of things like that. So that's a fourth dimension that affects whether a tip should be shown or not, and it's one that affects how every other tip affects every other tip. So this is just to get tips to display in the right place at the right time, and there's 4 different like vectors of enabledness and stuff like that. So that's the new system, and I think it's working really well, but we've never shown it to, we've never tried it on a real human being yet. But that again, it was kind of an interesting challenge, but it's not the thing I live for, you know? The thing I live for is adding something new to the game, and then I'm playing the game, and the game is suddenly like, oh my god, that was so fucking cool, did you see what I just did? I am having moments like that with a different system, which is you can now get sucked out of ships. When a ship gets destroyed, I mentioned earlier, they can be modularly destroyed. Every missile destroys one module of a ship, and that means you can break a ship in half, or you can just knock a chunk out of it. But also each module inside is a room or a corridor, and those corridors lead to each other. And now when one module gets destroyed, all of the corridors leading to it suck everything out, including enemies, including loot, including you, including guns, and sometimes your objective will get sucked out into space. And then once you're in space, you can obviously come up around and pick yourself up with your own ship. But also you can fire your gun in space to propel yourself around, and that's really good fun. And I'm having amazing moments of just like launching myself into space and then like my pod gets destroyed, so I can't ever go back to it. So it's just me now. I've just got a gun. And if you've got like 32 shots and you're floating through space at this velocity and another ship goes past, if you can fire enough bullets in just the right way to affect your trajectory to drift over to his airlock, you can get inside and survive. And so I've put that in there. And that's the best cool thing I've added to heat signature that wasn't totally boring and a slog to do. But hopefully all the things that were a slog to do will, they will be the foundation for everything else that's going to be fun, but they are why heat signature is taking a while.